everyone, and welcome to Zeng This, Read This / Watch This edition.
Yes.
So today's topic is going to be on the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is based on the series of graphic novels Scott Pilgrim, and I'll go over each of them in a second after we finish explaining just some of the fun stuff. So of course, you've got me, Zenger.
And I'm Ellie.
And I guess we should just start off with, what's our opinion of the Scott Pilgrim phenomenon, or the Scott Pilgrim, I guess, I don't want to say subculture.
It has definitely
the Scott Pilgrim cult following that it has.
Cult.
There we go.
I would say it's a cult following.
So what's your opinion of it, Ellie?
I love it. I think it's very smartly done. Just all the, each X having the number on them, and just the way they incorporate the video game stuff in there into real life, and it's just I thought it was, like I said, it's very intelligent movie. It's great. It's very smart the way they did everything. It's if you're a fan of the whole video game genre and comic book genre, it's a nice mix of both kind of styles together. I think it's pretty cool. I like it.
Okay, so before we get into this too deeply, we are mainly focusing on the movie portion of it. I will be discussing, however, at moments, stuff from the comics when necessary.
Yeah.
So just to familiarize, we did say to do both, so by all means, we may take a deeper dive into the comics or graphic novel portion of the Scott Pilgrim world someday. But as has been pointed out, there is everything from movies to comic books to TV stuff. They had a few little Scott Pilgrim versus the animation to video games. So there's a wide gambit that covers this Scott Pilgrim stuff. So I would just like to point out real quick that I have read both the books. I've read all the books, I've played the game, and I've watched the movie, and I've watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the animation. So I became very well versed in the world of Scott Pilgrim. So Ellie, not trying to put you on the spot here with this, but what is your familiarization with the universe of Scott Pilgrim?
Well, I've played the video game. And I've read some of the books.
Okay.
Not all of them. And I've watched the movies several times.
All right.
Yeah.
So we keep bringing up the comics or the graphic novels.
Right.
So just to give a quick rundown of them, there are 6 in total, 6 volumes in total, and they are named as such. Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is, of course, where the movie gets its namesake from.
Right.
Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together, Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, and then Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour. And those are the 6 volumes that this movie does focus on. Now, this movie had an interesting development as well. It was being developed basically almost after the first volume came out. It was picked up very quickly for development. So the ending of the movie and the ending of the comic were kind of being written and done simultaneously.
Well, a lot of things from the movie inspired the later volumes as well. So
it's very interesting, and just want to point out that these were written by Brian Lee O'Malley, who also I know was very, very heavily involved with the making of the movie. So I guess we should just start discussing the movie since that's why we told everyone to watch it, so we better start discussing it soon.
And I just kind of wanted to mention too, or you can mention the timeline of the books versus the movie.
Yes, I was going to get into that real quick.
Yeah.
So the books take place, and I know that we're not going to try to do a comparison between the two, but I will, like I said, bring up certain little tidbits from one to the other. But the books take place over about a year's worth of time. So that's just giving you an idea of, the time scale that they deal with in the books.
Right.
Whereas the movie's events seem to transpire over probably maybe a week at the most. So just for a quick comparison there's something that's kind of interesting, and it kind of, like I said, we'll discuss, certain aspects of that as we get into this. So I guess we should start with, the movie now, finally.
Yes.
So it came out in 2010, and like I said, it's relatively, well, I guess it's getting kind of old now. It is 2017 now.
Right.
But, no, it was one of those movies. I enjoyed the opening. It was the 8-bit version of the Universal theme, so I thought that was really cool. And as Ellie said, it is very video game referential during it.
Yes.
It has a lot of, I guess you could kind of say Deadpool-esque cutaways at times. I know Deadpool's a newer thing, but it has kind of that fourth wall breaking aspect of, there's stuff that happens where you have like little word bubbles come up, or little stuff that kind of fourth dimension breaking stuff that kind of alter reality sort of moments too. So it's,
well, you do have the travel through subspace.
There's that, which is mentioned in the movie as well. So there's that. I mean, it's kind of one of those things to where I feel like this movie was sort of nerd culture. How I guess every geeky, nerdy kid kind of wanted to imagine their life was like, with, power-ups and, stuff like that.
It kind of mixes different games, too, because you've got, like, the extra lives, like in the Mario days.
You got coins from various games.
Right, and then you've got, plus 5 charisma and plus this and that's more of a role-playing element type thing that you get when you add buffs and, when he gets the sword. And, so it mixes a lot of different genres of games.
So we're introduced to Scott Pilgrim, who is our main character and everything, and his little band, Sex Bomb.
Yes.
Who has Kim Pines on drums, Steven Stills as the guitarist, and Scott as the bassist, and he brings his new girlfriend, who is Knives Chow, along for like a rehearsal they do. And his girlfriend, it is pointed out,
a jam session.
It is pointed out at nauseum that his girlfriend is still in high school and is 17.
And Asian. And
it's
has
one of those
schoolgirl outfit. So yes.
so they give him a hard time about
check
about that, and that's something that once again is pulled over from the comics, and something I really liked in the comics that they do in the movie. When they introduce people, they have like their little stat thing beside them.
Yes, I love that.
Like their age and certain things like that. So that's something that keeps coming up in both. The comic kind of had it in almost every volume, and they changed slightly, so it was really funny to see how they changed from volume to volume.
Like they were leveling up?
Yeah, well just different, little attributes of each of them.
Right.
So we're sort of introduced to Scott Pilgrim, who's a slacker, who's kind of, just hanging out with Knives and everything.
And the best roommate ever.
Yes, and we're introduced to his house, which is basically like a barely 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah,
that's
pretty
kind
tiny.
of his little hole in the wall, literally.
Even though it's not his.
It isn't his. It's actually his roommate Wallace, who.
Which in the movie they do a great job of, like, Wallace's chair, Wallace's bed.
And that is something that is carried over from the comics, and it points out that the poster, the less than classy poster is Scott's. Mm-hmm. And it points out that everything else is Wallace's.
Right.
So I thought that was very cool that carried over and everything. But it kind of goes from there to where he meets Ramona. And really at a party, and really wants to get to know her and everything.
Well, he dreams of her first.
Well, they actually explain it in the movie as well as in the comic. He actually has a subspace bypass that goes through his head, and it cuts down on her travel time a lot. So that's why he dreamed of her, because she's able to access this thing called subspace, which is really not explained that much in the. It's kind of explained in the movie, but they explain a little bit more in the comics, and it's a big plot point in the comics. But like I said, this is not
it kind of just exists in the movie. Yeah,
it's basically it's her way of traveling from point A to point C by skipping point B, if that makes any sense. It's sort of that's the easiest way in the movie to sum it up.
Right.
And he meets her and he goes to a party, meets and talks to her, and then proceeds to go home and order something off of Amazon.com, because she knows that she delivers, and he eventually does get her phone number and everything. Mm-hmm. But there's 7 X's on there, which is important.
7 evil.
Well, he doesn't know that. It's just 7 X's on there, and he just thought they were like little kisses.
Right.
And Wallace does point out at one point in the movie that does stand for her 7 evil exes.
Not
We'll get to that
boyfriends.
because they do keep pointing
Yes.
out that someone says you're evil ex-boyfriends, and everyone keeps correcting him for a while on exes, and it is pointed out later. But let's just jump ahead because.
Let's go to the first act.
Yes. All right. So the first X is Matthew Patel.
Yes.
And he is introduced during a battle of the bands that they are at. And music is a very important part of this movie.
Right.
What did you think of a lot of the music that was in this movie? Because this is where we're first introduced to the music aside from their little jam sessions.
Well, I mean, it's typical of that, like, high school / soon out of high school garage band kind of feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's...
All right. So an interesting thing is...
Oh, well, Beck wrote all of the Sex Bombs.
And I know that a lot of other artists did help with this. That was really cool that they actually, got the songs and everything. And I thought that was interesting. But a thing we did skip, though, is when he's ordering that, is when he's on the computer earlier, he does get an email from Matthew Patel.
Right, and he ignores it.
He basically is reading it.
Yes.
And he is so bored reading it that he doesn't even finish it. But then, basically, Matthew Patel smashes through the ceiling and begins to fight him. And it's kind of explained by, Wallace and everyone else around what's going on, because Scott has no clue, and a lot of other people don't. That he's
Right.
basically having to fight her first boyfriend to earn her love, to earn Ramona's love during this.
And you get a little, I like the way you get a little peek into Ramona when she explains, like, how she met each one of them.
The little animation thing?
Yes.
That is page for page from the comic,
Yes.
almost.
So I think that's really, really cool the way you're trying to figure out, who was the bad person in this situation, and, was she really that mean to everybody,
Yeah.
or what? Like, why does she have this group? But I thought it was neat that Scott first realizes that these people some of them have powers.
Yes.
Mattel does.
Much like bosses
Patel.
in games, too. So, just something to point out real quick. When I said that it's taken straight from the comic, it is literally comic panels from the comic when it flashes back. So that's just something I just wanted to make sure to explain that real quick.
Right.
So that was... So he wins that fight, and it's kind of explained...
And I love his little demon...
His little demon
chicks.
hipster girls and
Yes,
everything.
they're so cute.
I guess we could talk about the fight real quick. The fight was really cool because it is taken... The fight in the comic happens a little bit differently, but as I've said, I'm not gonna delve into that. But I think the way that they did it in the movie worked very well, and it looked really cool, and it was very video gamey the whole time too.
And I was impressed how because I'm just saying, like, if I started dating somebody and they had evil exes, like, Scott jumps right on in there.
Yeah,
Like, I was pretty impressed by the way he. He did his share of stuff too, and not knowing that it was coming, I was impressed that he could do that.
Now, like I said, I like the fight. He kind of, everyone explodes into change too.
Yes,
Which
and
is-
it gets bigger throughout the
Yes.
movie. Each evil X, it's more money.
Which is just kind of funny. It's just kind of a little, once again, video game
Yes.
nod, because we haven't pointed out enough that this is very video gamey.
Yeah, and just to point out too, really quick, so we can reference it later, is Knives passes out,
Yes.
so she does not witness this fight.
That is something that is very important, is that he doesn't really break up with Knives, per se.
He keeps being told to. Wallace
Yeah.
actually keeps telling him,
That you need to break
Yeah.
it off with Knives.
if you're going to be interested in
Ramona.
Ramona. So, yes.
So that's something that's kind of interesting in there, because I mean, do you think Scott Pilgrim... I guess we could get into this later.
Yeah, we'll get into this later.
Okay. So I guess we got to move on to the...
Lucas Lee.
Yes, Lucas
Love
Lee,
it.
who I would like to make some kind of super nerd level connections real quick. Lucas Lee in the movie is played by Chris Evans, Captain America. And funny enough, he has stunt doubles that actually fight for him at one point.
Yes.
Those are his actual stunt doubles. Chris
Once
Evans.
again-
Chris Evans' actual stunt doubles.
Once again, such a smart movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so cute the way it does everything.
And he has, and all of the characters have different little nods to what number they are.
Yes.
Lucas Lee points with 2 fingers all the time. Matthew Patel points with 1, and he has 1 eye covered. So there's a lot of nods to each.
To their number,
we'll try to get each number, even though there's the twins later on that are a little bit more complicated
Right.
to do that with in the movie. But Lucas Lee is an actor and basically like one of the biggest action stars. And I thought it was very funny that Wallace is obsessed with him.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny.
Right.
And I thought it was really meta where he is threatening Scott through the TV.
Yes.
Like there's that scene where he's
Well,
on the phone.
and he's in town filming a
Yes.
movie, so that's why he's in close proximity.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he basically threatens Scott and kind of attacks him and beats him up and everything. But it basically, I'm kind of just gonna jump to the end of this one.
Yeah.
Because he basically grinds a giant rail that's supposed to be like impossible to grind on a skateboard.
Well, Scott is really good about using his wits
Yes.
to outwit these people. So he realizes that some of these people he is not going to be able to physically beat. And so I like the way for Lucas is he's like, I'm not going to be able to beat this guy, but I'm going to play on his ego,
Yes.
and basically challenge him to do this thing, grind down this impossible. It's ridiculously long and everything, but yes. So I like that.
It's a rail that basically goes down through
Yeah.
this park and everything. And it's really funny because it does have like a speed thing that's counting up how fast he's going.
Yes.
And he does wreck and
Explodes.
yeah, and basically
Coins.
explodes into a ton of coins and everything.
Yeah.
So that part's really funny and everything, how that kind of happens, and he's kind of upset and everything that he didn't get his autograph. But then Ramona pieces out kind of really quick after that, and they kind
Because
of
she feels bad.
yes. But there is something that we should talk about before we talk about the third Evil X.
Oh, I can't wait. I love the third Evil X.
So, Scott also has some baggage. Now, it's been
Yes.
pointed out that, yes, Ramona does have baggage. Scott does too, in the form of Envy Adams, who is his previous ex. And they delve a lot more into it. Once again, I'm not trying to do a compare and contrast, but they do dive into it a little bit more in the comics. A lot more, actually, in the comics. But in the movie, she is not to be named. She is somebody who's not to be brought up. And I'm kind of wanting to point out a few things here at this moment. You're introduced to Scott's sister, who I find extremely funny, and a lot of people who might have seen this might recognize her because she is also she's in Pitch Perfect for any of you fans of that.
Yay!
Of that. She's Scott's sister. She's in the movie enough.
Right.
She's in just the right amount. So I thought that she was a good, sister to Scott and everything like that. So the band is going to go watch a show, and it's the Clash at Demon Head, which is Scott's ex, Envy Adams, who I'm going to point out once again, another super nerdy thing here. Envy Adams is played by Brie Larson. Now, for anyone who's in, the comic books and everything, here's another connection to a superhero. She is going to be Captain Marvel. Or Miss Marvel, a.k.a. Carol Danvers. So just another kind of weird connection there. But before we get to that, there's one more character I wanted to mention, Julia. His one, I guess, friend, the one whose party we went to, and she works at the she works everywhere.
Yes.
She works at the music store, at the coffee shop, and it was really funny because this movie, of course, was rated PG-13. So they couldn't have too much cussing. But what they did with the cussing was they actually had like a black bar and everything go across her mouth. And I just thought that was really cool because Scott actually references it.
Yeah,
he goes, how do you keep doing that with your mouth?
Yeah.
So they go to the show and everything. And Scott's freaking out because, it's his ex who, completely, quote-unquote, destroyed him.
Right.
But also, there's another ex there.
Yes.
Okay, Ellie's excited because
I'm excited.
This is one of her favorites.
It is one of my favorites, for sure.
All right, go for it.
So this is Todd Ingram. And Todd is who Envy leaves Scott for.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. So we have a whole bunch of... And he's the basis of the band. Mm-hmm. And since Zenger keeps pointing out all these superhero references...
Oh.
Brandon Roth is actually... He played Superman.
Yes, in Superman Returns. And also Adam in the Legends of Tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So we got two for superhero there.
I know.
But he is the third evil X.
Yes. And he is pretty awesome because he has vegan powers.
Yes.
Psychic vegan powers.
Not fully really explained super well in it. It kind of just gives him sort of telepathy and super strength and just kind of...
Well, and this is another one that Scott has to use his wits. Because... Let me just tell you, it's pretty one-sided.
Well, before we get into the fight, there's a few cool references I wanted to point out that are both in the comic and in the movie. In the movie, in both, he does punch the moon to show his love for Ramona. Right. Which, if you see the moon, you do notice that it does have a giant crater in it. This is interesting because if you're a fan of a certain anime called Akira, this might be familiar to you. I misspoke. I meant the manga Akira. Because I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there going, wait a second, that never happened in that movie. Because it actually happened in the manga, which the movie and the manga for that are completely different, but it is taken frame for frame from the manga where he goes up and punches it. So that's just really cool for any of you anime fans. If you read the Akira anime and the part where he punches the moon, it's basically the same thing.
Well, and Envy gets jealous too because she thought that he punched the moon for her only, but he had actually punched it for Ramona first.
Yes.
So that causes a little bit of craziness, and the number 3 is on his shirt.
Yes, and he also punches the highlights out of Knives' hair,
which is different than the comic book, but...
do you got this one covered?
Well, in the comic book, the guitarist...
Drummer.
Sorry. In the comic book, the drummer actually punches the highlights out of the hair.
With her robotic arm.
Yes.
And there's a whole nother B story, C story with...
Which they don't,
with those characters that doesn't really get involved with the drummer and everything. She's more involved in the...
And she is in the movie.
She's in the background.
Standing against the wall.
Which is taken frame for frame from the comic of that scene. She is in the same spots and everything. Which this movie does a fantastic job of transitioning from comic to...
Well, using the reference
obviously
material.
Using the same angles and everything. Here's something else interesting I just want to point out, though. We're referencing all the numbers. Scott is normally wearing a shirt that says 0 or some kind of weird numbering with him too. So I know in this fight he definitely has the 0 on. So, and also I think we should really quick point out one other thing about Todd. He is the bassist for the band. Yes. So him and Scott get into a fight that is obviously very one-sided.
Well, they start out physical first.
Yes.
And he just completely one-sided, gets his butt whipped.
And obviously, Todd is not the best when it comes to, how do you say, speaking at times.
Right.
So there's a lot of he'll say stuff and he'll make like. Oh my
gosh, the joke that he said with the maid and on Friday.
You know
Monday.
What? I really enjoyed that joke because it was one of those. The joke was bad. He then explained the joke and then continued to explain. It was one of those, I found it got funnier the longer it took for the joke to finally just get over and done with.
Yeah, and everybody's just kind of like, You know, and it's funny the way Envy felt like she had to, like, jump in and, you know, make side comments about, yeah, right, yeah. Like, it was just, the way she was trying to support him was just kind of comical. And so Scott tries to outwit him, but he's like, I'm going to challenge him to a base-off, which was a mistake as well.
Yeah.
So, he starts flying, levitating, and you can just tell that he's going to get his butt kicked in the base competition as well. So,
gets thrown through multiple walls
yes.
again.
So, and it's the vegan police are my heroes.
Well, this is an interesting, I guess, would it be a callback to, I guess, Princess Bride, sort of? What would you say, the whole, that he put half and half in both?
Oh, are you talking with the poison
with
thing?
With the poison. I kind of got that vibe because there's a point where he has cups of coffee.
Right.
And he offers it to Todd. And Todd can, of course, read his mind because vegan powers. Why not? And Scott tricks him by just thinking really hard that he put the half and half in one cup.
And can I just point out, how the crap did those cups of coffee survive?
Him getting thrown through the table of...
Thrown through the table, but there happens to be 2 regular cups with coffee available.
He was able to put
him.
half and half
Yeah,
in.
it's amazing. So
he basically tricks Todd by
right.
He puts half and half, I think, in both, or he just focuses on one really hard.
Right.
Sorry, I'm getting it mixed up with Princess Bride now because in that it is...
It's a good movie to get things
It is. But there's that, and the vegan police basically show up.
Yes.
And that scene to me was just really funny.
Oh my gosh, I loved it. And Todd's like, don't I get
3 strikes?
Multiple chances? Yes, exactly.
And then they explain that he had a few other things. I think it's chicken.
Chicken parm.
Yeah, and he's like,
yes. And then
chicken's
he's
not vegan?
oh my gosh.
So he gets depowered and Scott basically headbutts him.
And we all know that if you had vegan powers and you lose them, your hair just immediately goes flat, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he gets depowered and then headbutted, and I thought that scene was really funny.
Yes. So once again, using his wits.
Yes, he used his wits there, and kind of going to take this moment to once again say this is very different from what happens in the comic. Even though certain elements are the same, their fight in the comic is actually a little different, and has similar beats to it. So definitely check it out. They both work in their own thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess we will move on to number 4.
Yes.
And number
Roxy.
4. Yes. Now, she was alluded to both in the comic and in the movie earlier on. Now,
well, he first meets her in a alleyway, and he's like, I am not in the mood.
Yeah, Scott meets her, and he's like, I'm not in the mood. Roxy, before we get into talking about her fight and everything, is played by Mae Whitman. Now, this is fun in the fact of, if you know Michael Cera, he, of course, was in Arrested Development. Mm-hmm. She was as well, and she was the one that everyone kept referring to as her in the show. So I just thought that was a nice, funny connection. Once again, this movie, very culty, very self-referential, very humorous in the fact of the one female that Roxy dated is referred to, is the character in another show just called her.
Right.
So she does have a name in Arrested Development and everything. Everyone just calls her. Anyways, getting to her in the movie though. Mm-hmm. So this is a very funny scene. So they go and she's the 4th one. She's number 4 on the list. So he's almost halfway through now.
Right.
And it's later that night after Todd and him and Ramona sort of have a discussion about the whole situation, and it is continued to be pointed out to Scott during this conversation that it is evil exes, because he keeps on saying boyfriends and she keeps on correcting him saying exes.
Right.
And they get in a fight at the club, and the club is called 4. She has 4 slices on her shirt, and there's several other 4 references in there, but I guess Ramona's kind of fed up too, because she decides to fight during this.
Well, and Scott is starting to show his his douchebaggery.
Yes.
Because they do start to have...
You wanna have that discussion now real quick?
Oh, we can if you want.
Okay. Scott, in my opinion, is a likable character for a good chunk of the movie.
Right.
But...
he definitely has his flaws.
He has his flaws.
And he's hurt people himself.
Yes. Yeah. He's hurt people. Kim is pointing out that he hurts because it is pointing out that the drummer and him used to date. And it's always a very awkward thing when it's brought up. Julia, of course, points out, all these people that, he's been with and, and broken their hearts and everything and vice versa.
And she warns him not to...
mess with Ramona.
Right, exactly.
And everything. And it's just, he is a likable character, but I feel like he has to... for him to truly grow by the end of the movie, he has to be somebody you don't like 100% the entire way through the movie, which I thought was an interesting thing. And the comics are the same, but they get into it a lot deeper. There's a lot more deeper stuff that happens in the comics. Like I said, I keep saying this, but I'm not trying to do a compare-contrast. It's just, it is very interesting that they carried that over and did, I think, a good job of still portraying that he really wasn't that likable at certain points in the movie, which is perfectly fine.
And he's oblivious to that.
Yes,
he really just doesn't see why he's such a bad person.
Exactly. So the Roxy fight is very interesting because Ramona does get involved in that.
Well, he doesn't want to hit a girl.
Yes. So
he has the realization that yes. So it that's
is
very well done.
It is pointed out that they did have a relationship with each other, and it was really unique how it was done in the movie, and it just kind of zoomed in on his head, and it like flipped a little arrow over that says that he got it, and he finally figured out that Ramona did date a chick at one point, and
it was her experimental phase,
and that was, of course, why she kept saying my evil exes and not my evil ex-boyfriends.
Yes.
So I thought that was that was a funny little joke there, and the whole fight was kind of funny because eventually Ramona
we gotta keep it. We're gonna try to keep it PG.
I was gonna say, Ramona was using him like a rock'em sock'em robot by trying to get Scott to punch him. She also used her iconic hammer, which was very fun during that fight.
Yes.
But basically they subdue or kind of beat
a finger to the back of the knee.
Yes, which is
ting.
Which is interesting, but yes, she is defeated there.
He finishes her off.
There we go.
We'll just leave it at that.
He finishes Roxy off.
Yes.
All right, so after that, some stuff happens, and, character development, which we kind of discussed a minute ago with, not everyone's likable in this, but the band, of course, Sex Bomb is still going strong and gets challenged to another gig, which apparently a guy named Gideon is supposed to be at, who that name has been dropped in the past and everything. Yeah, and it has some significance, but it's, once again, Scott's oblivious, so he hasn't really figured out why. But they have to go up against the Caddy Nagy twins.
At the same time.
Yes.
So this isn't like they perform first and then the other people perform next. It's like simultaneous kind of competition.
It's one of those, there's stages on each side.
Yes.
And they have to go against them. I know that we've referenced some of the numbers stuff in this one. There is references to the numbers. I'm just not going to get into that on this one because since it's kind of a twofer, I'm just going to kind of say, both the twins, and it's kind of explained that she dated them at the same time.
Yes.
Just they didn't know that, the one didn't know the other one was dating her and everything, sort of thing. So they get into a huge battle, techno versus rock.
It's pretty cool.
And they basically are able to summon forth, avatars of, musical sound to battle each other. So it's
pretty awesome.
It's visually really cool and everything, and it's a lot of fun. And it's completely different from the comic, so I'm just pointing that out real quick for a second.
Well, and this is where Scott gets his extra life.
Yes, in the movie, this is where Scott gets his extra life during this battle and everything. But Ramona is seen there with Gideon and goes off with him.
Yes.
And the band gets signed by Gideon, but they drop Scott in the process.
Right.
And young Neil gets who is a character that's kind of floated around in this.
Yes.
is able to step up, and it has been pointed out earlier in the movie that he does know all of Scott's parts.
Right. Yes.
So basically, Scott's kind of defeated. He's lost his girlfriend. He's lost his band. And Wallace and him are kind of talking, and he sort of eggs Scott on to go, have his final battle. So he has to go face Gideon, kind of have his final battle with it. And it is to point out that Gideon is her final ex, too.
Right.
And something interesting, a lot of the symbols for the Chaos Theater and Gideon stuff is it's a G, but it's turned, so it looks like if you turn it more, it looks like a 7. Mm-hmm. It's actually a 7 like on its side. So there's his reference. Also, you said the whole thing about stat boost. During the fight, he gets stat boost, and they're all derivatives of 7. I mean, they're all times 7. So there's that for his little number thing. But so Scott goes to the Chaos Theater basically to fight and everything, and Sex Bob-omb's there. And once again, Kim Pines, I don't think we've discussed how just I want to say a lot of her lines are just solid gold. Just the way the actress did a lot of the stuff. Like she's talking during it, and she's like, "We're Sex Bob-omb, and we're here to sell out and make money and everything." And if you notice, she's like scratching herself with her middle finger the entire time. So, and she has other stuff that she's done throughout the movie that I really enjoyed. But then there's the whole fight between Scott and Gideon and everything, and
Knives shows up.
Yeah, she does, but Scott dies during the fight. But because basically Gideon steals his power of love, because he basically gets a power up during it where he gets the sword, and it's the power of love, and he uses it to fight.
Right.
And he still gets defeated by Gideon, but then
because he gets distracted by talking to Knives. He's trying to stop the fight between Knives and Ramona.
Yes.
And Gideon gets him from behind.
Yes.
So I think that's important to point out, because if we're going to talk about how he grows as a character.
Bingo.
So
then going back, it's pointed out that he has a second life. Also, there's a spot there where he's in subspace once again with Ramona, and she kind of points out that she's under a mind control at the time.
Right.
That Gideon has her under mind control. So that's pointed out there. So he goes.
But it's funny and quirky the way it's like she's like, I can't control myself around him, and you're thinking it's because she's
once again
with
Scott's
him.
not getting it.
Right. Right.
So he
uses his extra life.
He uses his extra life, gets a multiplier bonus the entire time.
Yes.
2 goes in, and there's actually, I'm pretty sure it's when he goes in the second time, you can actually hear somebody talking in the background saying, "Oh yeah, I thought the comic was better than the movie."
And can I point out how funny the passwords were to get
yes,
in?
the passwords were pretty funny.
Yeah, whatever. The first one was like whatever, and the second one was like, ugh. It was great. I thought that was hilarious.
And then he goes in, and he comments on Sex Bob-omb first. He apologizes to Kim for the way he treated her.
Right, which was healing.
He points out to Steven Stills that the band's better without him, and then comments to young Neil, but refers to him as just Neil.
Yes. Which
is like a big moment, because everyone always refers to him as young Neil.
Right.
So that's kind of, once again, he's learned from his mistakes. And then he goes to fight Gideon, and Gideon thinks that he's going to be fighting him for, Ramona's love, and he goes, "No, I'm fighting because I don't like you." And then that's when Scott...
Well, he's fighting for himself.
Yeah, he's like, I don't like you, and I want to put you in your place, and he earns the power of self-respect.
Right.
Which is apparently stronger than the power of love.
I guess, yes.
But anyway, so the fight happens, Knives once again gets involved, but during it, Scott kind of points out, hey, I was the one that was wrong in this situation. I cheated on both of you.
Yes.
And the fight happens, they defeat Gideon and everything.
So now let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
So were you going to ask earlier, was that cheating? Like, what were you going to ask earlier? Because you were like, we'll talk about that later. Do you feel like he was really cheating on both
I was
of them?
just, I think I was just referencing that we'll discuss, Scott as a character later. But is it cheating? Yeah, he kind of did.
At least mentally.
Yes, because he didn't really break up with Knives. I don't.
Right.
He kind of just was like, man, we're done.
I mean, he does break up with her, but after he was already kind of emotionally invested with Ramona as well.
And kind of with Ramona at that point. He had already fought one of the exes, too.
Right, correct.
So yeah, I would consider that and everything. But no, so that whole fight happens. And
they all kind of combine together.
Yeah, they all kind of fight together. And there's a reference back to the game that Scott and Knives played, the ninja game. So that was a cool callback to that.
Where they combo.
Yes. And they defeat...
Two-player mode.
And they defeat Gideon. He explodes into a ton of coins and everything. But then someone else shows up.
Nigga Scott.
Yes, so it's basically the negative version of Scott. And everyone leaves because he's like, I got this. And they're standing outside the Chaos Theater, Knives and Ramona are.
Right.
And Scott and Nega Scott kind of walk out, just chit-chatting and everything. And they're like, hey, we'll go get pancakes.
And he's like, he's actually kind of a really nice guy.
Yeah.
That was so funny to me.
I thought it was definitely amusing and everything that this whole, you thought there was going to be a bigger fight, and it's just it's nothing.
Well, in the comic,
I'll get to
yeah.
I'll have a longer diatribe at the end of this. I decided.
But yeah, in the comic, Nega Scott was first.
Yes,
so it was flip flopped.
Nega Scott is encountered before.
Right.
He has to go to the Chaos Theater. But the movie ends with basically him and Ramona going off together. There was actually an ending done where him and Knives get back together instead, because he kind of, realized that he has a better connection with her. I just think it's interesting that they had that that they did film and do both endings, but the one that everyone saw in the end.
Well, I mean, yeah,
was the Ramona one.
Knives versus Ramona. It's one of those things where. It's kind of hard because in the movie, Ramona was kind of biatchy.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, I was definitely, throughout the movie, I was definitely pulling for Knives more. So I guess but I feel like that the movie ending was perfect because... Mm-hmm. I feel like Scott and Ramona kind of deserve each other.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Like when Knives says at the end, "I'm too good for you," and I know she's being lighthearted about it and everything, but I kind of feel like she is.
Think about it. Ramona sort of didn't tell Scott, that you're gonna have to fight all my exes.
Well, yeah, they both have
and
baggage.
That's kind of the movie is kind of. Their exes and all this stuff, if you want to get metaphorical about it, is the baggage everyone brings into a relationship and must overcome to truly be technically, I guess, one in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Is you have to sort of battle all the evil exes that exist in this person's life. So
that's why I feel like they were good for each other because they both had their share of and Knives was more coming from the innocent side and hadn't really done anything bad to anybody, and so that's why I thought it was well done that Scott and Ramona ended up together.
Now I could go into like I said, a deeper dive into a ton of different stuff in the comics. Nega Scott's existence is actually explained a lot better in the comics because he's sort of the negative emotions of Scott the entire time and all the people he sort of damaged. I'm kind of summing this up real quick. There's a lot more stuff with differences and how a lot of the battles take place. There's a lot more character development with the sub characters.
Well, and that's possible when you have multiple volumes to go through and a movie you've got to do it.
Yes. Now here's the thing. Okay, let's
concise.
Now if I'm going to say this before we get into our sort of final verdict on this. Mm-hmm. If you would like us to do the comics, let us know.
Yeah.
We would love to do like an episode on each of them and everything because they are really good and
they are very good.
I did enjoy reading them and everything, and I would love to talk about them more because I don't like doing the compare and contrast with the movie. I just wanted to point out certain little tidbits that are kind of interesting for it. Kind of maybe entice some people to read the comic. But they are very different from each other, but they sort of have the same message at times and get the same point across.
Right.
Moving on from that real quick. So, I guess our final verdicts on this. Did this movie work for you?
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
For people that have read the books and watched the movie, I think it kind of works well for both. It's definitely, if you just watch the movie on its own, you've never read the books, you don't know anything about them, and just enjoy it as its own thing.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like I said, it's colorful, it's poppy, it's a great
referential.
Yeah, it's a great reminiscing of
nostalgia.
Childhood games and all that other stuff, the 8-bit time period and everything. So just overall, the movie by itself is fantastic. I highly recommend it. There might be a few generations that don't get it.
Yeah.
I think the younger generations now won't get as much out of it. Like, it's still a good standalone movie, but definitely people in the right age bracket would get more out of this, just because, like you said, the nostalgic part of it. But I absolutely love it. Definitely recommend checking this movie out. What about you?
Well, I read the comics, and I'll admit, I watched the movie first, then went back and read the comics in the intervening time between when I saw it in the theater and when I actually picked it up on DVD. I read all the comics and everything, and to be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed the comics. Now, I want to point out, the movie does work, in my opinion, on its own. It works as its own thing. It's one of those things that, you can sit there and pick apart it, but the movie, it doesn't cut anything out from the comics to make the movie not work, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain things that don't happen, but all the main beats are there that need to be there. The comic is phenomenal. What I would like to see maybe one day is possibly like a TV miniseries, to where you have 1 hour for each of the volumes and then a 2-hour finale. If you want a more true interpretation of the comics, since everything is now written and done instead of in the process. Like I said, I think the movie works. I think it is definitely a cult classic. It is something to where I actually have a ringtone on my phone. I do have the 8-bit Universal theme as a ringtone on my phone, and I thoroughly love the movie. I love the comics. I love everything that was done with this. So I just wanted to point out, I think it does work. My only complaint is, if I do ever want a more true version of the comic, I don't think it should be like several movies. It shouldn't be like a movie franchise. It should be a TV sort of mini-series. I think would work really well if they wanted to have a more true interpretation.
Right.
So yeah, but it is very pop culture. It's Edgar Wright, who, if you are familiar with that, he's done the Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, at the World's End, that stuff. So it's I think it works really well. He did a great job with this. And, of course, this movie wasn't, the box office smash everyone thought it was going to be, but it did have a very huge, uprising once it came to, to home video versions.
Right. Yeah.
So I just want to say, if you haven't seen this movie, definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of this podcast.
Or watch it again. You'll probably see stuff that you missed the first time.
Yeah, watch it again, because there is a lot of stuff that if you've read the comics, or just, us pointing out stuff like the crater in the moon is something that I don't want to admit how many times watching it. It's just one time I just happened to notice it and went, wait a second.
Right.
Because they don't show the moon that often, but it's there enough to where you can catch it. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of great stuff. Pick up the comic, read that. Let us know if you want to hear more of that from us.
Yeah, and the comic did start out black and white, but they have released versions.
They have released the colored version of it. So if you want one that's colored and everything, it's really cool. Like I said, I definitely recommend it. But I guess we're gonna wrap up here with our read this / watch this, mostly watch this for this month. Would you like to announce what our next month's one will be?
Yes, it's an oldie but goodie.
All right.
Do you remember a series called The Do you remember a series called The Umbrella Academy?
I know you've mentioned it several times.
I love it. Gerard Way, actually.
My Chemical Romance lead singer.
Yes.
If that name does not ring a bell, and if it is ringing a bell and you're wondering who it is, you're welcome.
Yes. He actually does this. And it's the first in the series. There's a little bit more afterwards. And he has done other stuff, but we're going to be focusing on the first volume of The Umbrella Academy. So I'm super excited about that.
All right, and actually, here's a fun thing. I've never read a single issue of this, so I will actually be reading this for the first time. Ellie will be rereading it, and
Yes.
we hope you will be reading along with us. So definitely check that out later in the month of June. As always, you can find us on SoundCloud, TuneIn, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes. If it's on iTunes, definitely give us a 5-star review. Or if there's a way to review us on any of the other ones, review us there too. We greatly appreciate it. You can, of course, also find us on
Facebook.
Zeng This.
Yep.
If you want to tweet at us.
At Zeng This.
If you want to check out some photos and stuff we do, you can always go to
At Zeng This Podcast.
on Instagram. Mm-hmm. If you want to see us playing any games, you can go to twitch.tv/Zingness.
Yes. And if you want to support us, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can go to Patreon, www.patreon.com/zingthis.
And if you would like to email us directly, it is zingthis@gmail.com. We'd like to thank Aaron for our sound effects,
Yes.
and we would also like to give a shout out to DJ Golden Boy as he plays us out.
89.
Yeah, DJ Golden Boy 89.